Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another session of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Hales. I'm your moderator. We have with us Allison Chatterjee. She's the Associate Director for Online Program Assessment at IU Online, IU being Indiana University. She started there just as the one assessment manager. Now it's expanded. She's got a team of professionals who coordinate the learning outcomes for nearly 50 programs. And not only I, but Molly is glad to have her with us. So, Allison, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you all for joining this afternoon here after lunch. Um, Before we get started, I wanted to bring your attention to the QR code that's on the first introductory screen here of the PowerPoint. That will take you to a file folder full of resources, including the PowerPoint presentation itself. So if anyone joins late, this QR code will also be at the end of the PowerPoint as well. So there will be some additional resources that I provide links to in the PowerPoint presentation. And again, I know you can't access them through this until you have access to the PowerPoint presentation, but everything will be there in that folder for you. So we like to share out resources as much as possible. So the subject of this presentation is our innovative approach to program assessment for our collaborative online programs, with a very specific focus on the development and implementation of rubrics for program learning outcomes assessment. So we're going to dive in now here. So getting to the outline of what we're going to talk about. First, I'll give you a little introduction on the structure of Indiana University. So Indiana University has 9 campuses, 7 of which participate in our collaborative online programs. These are collaborative online programs are uniquely challenging because of this decentralized nature, right? So 7 different physical campuses offer online instruction. The campuses can opt in or out of the programs, of these collaborative programs, and faculty from each of the campuses participate in the degree, in any given one of their collaborative degrees. And then we have faculty committees that are composed of representatives from each participating campus. So as we go through this presentation, I'll talk about some of the initial challenges that we had with program assessment to begin with, some of our strategies for addressing those challenges and developing a robust, scalable model for program assessment that's been generally well received by the faculty. I'll give you guys some data that we've collected as part of our program assessment process to help illustrate the impacts and outcomes of our approach. I do have some interactive pieces in here. I have some Menti polls that we'll get to. And then the conclusions and takeaways will summarize some appraisal and next steps. For our program assessment and assessment in general, we center everything on 4 guiding principles: a commitment to collaboration. It's not just about our collaborative degrees. We want to work collaboratively with the faculty to ensure that the programs meet their expectations. Mindfulness of faculty workload. Faculty have so many things going on and they're being pulled in so many different directions. We as staff support really are very mindful of what faculty limitations are and what they can and cannot do and what they have the capacity to do and do not have the capacity for. We embrace the iterative nature of assessment. So this, the graphic on this slide really emphasizes how interwoven and interconnected all the different pieces and parts of program assessment are. And we really lean into that. And then the fourth one is ensuring assessment is purposeful, sustainable, and strategic. We do not want to do assessment just for the sake of assessment. We want it to be useful data that is actionable, that their committees can do something with, so that they can brag about the students in their program, so they can address any curricular needs that need to be addressed, all of that. We want it to be useful. So how do we do this? So I mentioned we have faculty committees. Well, the faculty committees with representatives from each of the participating campuses maintain control of the degree program. The faculty committees are then supported by IU Online Academic Affairs support staff. So we have the program management team and the assessment team. The program management team provides curricular support. Is coordinating teaching schedules across the different campuses. Sometimes all 7 campuses participate, and that's a lot of different things to maneuver. The faculty committees decide on degree requirements and prerequisites, potential new course offerings, and the program management team helps make sure all documentation for those is recorded properly, all the different campuses receive notice, and any steps and processes to ensure that those are in place actually happen. So it's a lot of that background support staff work. Now, the program assessment team, which is my team, we focus on supporting the program level assessment for these collaborative online programs. So support staff, we work alongside the faculty committees to facilitate decision-making and implementation. We don't have any incentives to speak of, and we rely really heavily on goodwill and a common belief in the importance of providing high quality education to our online students. A newer development of our structure within IU Online Academic Affairs is those 50 or so collaborative programs are grouped into clusters. So similar to departments, but not quite. So we have a business cluster for collaborative programs, which includes 2 undergraduate degrees and 2 master's degrees in business. We have a technology cluster, which includes undergraduate degrees in data science, computer science, and informatics. We have a languages cluster, Spanish, German, and French degrees are all in there. So a bunch of different clusters to organize things. We now have faculty directors for all of these clusters. In the past, we only had a couple of faculty directors. Now we do have faculty directors for every single one of these clusters, which is amazing. So that adds another layer. Some faculty directors are very comfortable with program assessment. And for us, we just support them and they run the show when we're like, okay, you got it, we're good. Tell us what support you need from us. The vast majority, however, are still either very new to their role or new to program assessment. So we offer varying levels of support depending upon what those faculty directors need. In some cases, that means extra meetings and making sure that we are on the same page. And other times it means that they're like, y'all have been doing this for a couple of years now, just go with it. Do whatever you do and we'll catch up. So there's a lot of trust and goodwill that's already been developed just with this new structure added on, which is in a lot of contrast to what happened to begin with. So when the first collaborative online degree was launched in fall 2016, program assessment support was an afterthought. Assessment data was not systematic and was initially generated from course grades without any particular assessment instruments clearly defined or aligned to program outcomes. There were some efforts, especially in the 1920, 2021 academic years, to sustain or build up a concept of program assessment across and between programs. It was really inconsistent. There was a lot of staff turnover at that time as well, and it wasn't the highest priority. So implementation was inconsistent, non-transparent, and poorly specified. So with all of that, over the first 5 years of collaborative program growth, that meant that faculty were very frustrated, skeptical, and suspicious of program assessment, even as the number of programs grew to 39 active collaborative programs. So in the 21-22 academic year, program assessment assumed a greater priority. This led to hiring of assessment-focused staff, myself, and the creation and implementation of a standardized, intentional, faculty-centric collaborative approach. So I now have a team. So I started as the first program manager in fall 2021. We now have 2 additional senior assessment managers with the potential to hire more. I see a question in the chat. What is the time commitment of faculty directors for program assessment? And that will vary depending upon the individual. I work very intensely with the faculty director for our business programs. They have AACSB accreditation, and they are very concerned about program assessment, and they're very involved with that. In addition to the faculty director being heavily involved, I meet with him sometimes every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. We also have the assessment committee meetings with their assessment coordinators for the business degrees. And those typically, we'll talk about our meetings, but we have more of those assessment meetings for the business programs than we have standard for our other collaborative degrees because of their concern with accreditation. Some of our others, it's very low key and they have minimal involvement or just during the fall semester. Their role, the faculty director role currently right now, especially for the new ones, is more in line with the curricular changes. We have a lot of curricular changes that are happening with our programs right now. I'm going to try and mindful of the questions in the chat too. So if I don't get to them, let me know. So typically for our faculty committees, we have 2 meetings per semester via Zoom. I mentioned with the business folks, we have a lot more. I think last semester, we had 6 assessment meetings via Zoom for theirs. But they wanted joint curriculum and assessment meetings with their committee for their assessment report. So we had monthly in November. That was a lot. IU Online Program Assessment Team, my team, we coordinate those meetings. We create the agendas for them. They're very structured, very organized, very detailed. We run those by the faculty directors. We have meeting prep meetings. So we have meetings to prep for our meetings all the time. And some of them do by Zoom meetings, and some just are like, just send me an email with what the agenda is and we're good. These faculty committees for assessment are charged with establishing or revising for both the program goals, the program learning outcomes, developing and revising learning outcome rubrics that are course neutral and assignment neutral, and making program related recommendations based on assessment findings. What's not in here is also our end of program surveys. So we're establishing some new end of program surveys for program assessment. We have not yet run any alumni surveys yet. That's taking a little bit more coordination across the university with new efforts to centralize that. So in addition to what goes on during the meeting, our team makes a lot of prep time outside of the meetings, right, in order to get everything set. Yeah. So this is an example showcasing the grad certificate in criminal justice and public safety, one of their core curriculum learning outcome examples, what the original was before my team got involved. And then the revisions after we had some assessment committee meetings with guided discussion from our assessment lead. So each committee is assigned an assessment lead to help with their program assessment. So we divide it up and conquer, right? So we can't all, one person can't be in all places. So if you look at that original one, it's a compound complex, very difficult to measure a learning outcome. And before the meeting, the assessment lead would go through and offer some suggestions, break it down, see what might work, offer some rationales, all of that on the back end. Then we let the conversation happen naturally during the meeting. Some committees don't want to see our suggestions in advance or right at the beginning. They want to see the original and come up with things on the fly. Other committees are really open to say, what have you got for recommendations on how to revise this? We're stuck. We can't see anything beyond the original. Can you come up with some suggestions? In that case, we provide them in advance of the meeting for them to evaluate and tweak further as needed. Sometimes we offer suggestions and they're just nixed entirely. And that's okay. We are not the content experts. We accept the limitations of our positions and the expertise of the folks on the committee to correct us if we are misinterpreting things. The intent is to ensure that we are having active conversations and that all the faculty committee members have a voice in this process. What we ended up with are some revised learning outcomes, multiple learning outcomes rather than just a single one, that are much more measurable, much more focused on what they actually want to know, how their students are doing and what kind of things their students are learning in this program. And that's the end goal. So we follow the same kind of process when we work on developing rubrics. So our program learning outcome, once those program learning outcomes are at least preliminarily agreed by the faculty committee, we always say it's iterative, it can change, and they do change. Our team works on the back end to help develop out some criteria as a starting point for the faculty committee. We don't want to give them a blank paper. We want to give them something to respond to. So we do have a standard rubric with performance indicators of exceeds expectations, meets expectations, below expectations, and then no submission, no evidence. We adopted that, and it's undergone revision. So we tried to adopt it for as many programs as possible. There are exceptions. We have some of our programs that have special accreditation, some of our education degrees especially, that require other performance indicators and performance scales. We work with those the way they are and the way they have to be. When they're not in existence, we guide folks to this scale so that there's consistency between programs and so that we don't have to keep remembering all of the different variations, because then it gets really complicated to try and track. It also makes it easier for us to start automating our workflow when there's consistency. As a base, well, where do we get our ideas for our criteria for performance indicators and descriptions? Well, we leverage everything we can. We started off with the AAC&U value rubrics as a base, modifying them and editing them to fit these criteria, because the AAC&U value rubrics don't have a no submission, no evidence, and they have a 4-point scale. So we had to squinch and rearrange things as examples to start with. We leverage other rubrics that we have found from our assessment listservs and our assessment colleagues across all universities. We leverage anything we've got. our knowledge of the industry. And then, yes, we do even leverage AI and ChatGPT to help with areas that are really outside of our area of expertise, or when it's something that we've been struggling with multiple committees to try and get an idea. We also leverage the faculty committees themselves. So if one faculty committee has a really great idea for a criteria and their descriptions, we share it with everyone else that we work with. Most of the time, it's adopted in sequence by more faculty committees. So they're helping themselves. And that we give them props for all of that too. We tell them, we're going to use what you came up with and share it with other committees. And we like what you came up with so much that we're going to do this. So that in and of itself also helps bring out a little bit more positive attitude about the assessment culture. Now, when we're working with the faculty committees in real time, this is not just an exercise here that takes one day. Sometimes it can take more than an academic year, depending upon how the faculty committees work. So we work through Excel file. We send everybody the Excel file in advance, so everybody has access to it in the teams. And we project that on the screen during the Zoom meeting, and we actively edit it during the meeting. So I'm going to skip ahead here. These are the examples that I showed you. Again, for those who joined a little bit late, there will be a QR code on the last slide that you will be able to use to access these resources. And these are linked in both the PowerPoint and they're available in the file folder as well. So I've given an example of our adapted AAC&U value rubric templates. I've also given examples from a variety of different programs that we work with to show the variety of the process, but also the similarity. So we're going to look at the chemistry one as an example and do a deep dive. And normally when I've done this in person, I'd try and like flip back and forth in between the actual Excel file and show you. But I didn't want to do that in Zoom here because I wasn't sure how that was going to work. So I did do screenshots. So I'm limited with what I can show you here, which is again why I recommend looking at those additional documents when you have a chance. So for chemistry, we're going to look at learning outcome 1. This is kind of what we present to the committee during the meeting as our prep example. So this learning outcome is analyze a variety of chemical concepts and processes. So there's 2 criteria that have descriptions for everything, right? And both of those in their criteria name have problem solving in parentheses. That means that is from the problem solving AAC&U value rubric. We give credit where credit's due in our drafts here, so that we have a reference point for when we need to go back to something else. But then you'll see a lot of blanks. So in prior meetings, when the faculty committee was discussing this learning outcome, they had mentioned things like something about each of the 5 sub-disciplines, or identifying strategies, implementing solutions, and solving multi-concept problems. All of these pieces were things that they themselves mentioned in the meeting. Now, I didn't really know what to do with that information. So I put those in there as talking points. I'm like, okay, where do we go next here? Do we start with the ones that have stuff written out entirely? Do we develop the ones that are just your thoughts? Where do we go? And I let them determine the path. Okay. So one of the things, please note, at the top of this rating scale, no submission, no evidence isn't there. It does not meet expectations. That was one of the pieces that was inherited when I arrived. They had exceeds, meets, below, and does not meet expectations. And so there was lots of concern about, what does it mean? What does not meet expectations mean? How is that different from below expectations? Well, after we had enough faculty committees say, we don't like this, what can we do to change it? We changed it. And we changed it as much throughout as we possibly could. So that was another example of something that trickled through everything. So in our active meetings, our first step usually is, of the things that we have suggested, what doesn't work? Which criteria do not align with your idea of this learning outcome? Usually they'll be able to say at least one thing doesn't, if not multiple things. In that case, in the Excel document, we highlight, we gray it out, and hide them. We do not delete them because we want to keep a record of what was removed. And we want to keep a record of things that may have been dismissed because they may be applicable to learning outcomes later on. So we keep a record of everything and just collapse it down. Item collapse them. Then we work through, of the ones that are remaining, do we need to wordsmith? Do the descriptions match what you want? Does it say what you want it to say? If not, how do we fix it? And after we get through that step, and sometimes overlapping with that step, we ask, is there something that's missing? So do we need to develop out this implement solution piece that isn't addressed in these other areas? How do we develop that out? Now, again, not all of this happens in a single meeting. Sometimes my team has to, after the meeting, go back, make revisions, suggestions, consolidate all this information down, and then in the next meeting, prepare additional revisions. But as we are going through in a meeting, this is what it'll look like. For any text they don't want to include anymore, we strike it out. For any new text, new revisions are in red. So you'll see that in the meets expectations for the second criterion, even some of the red has been struck through because that committee was debating that language. So it's this real iterative process. Then the other thing you can see is that learning outcome changed. As they were going through this process of refining and defining, more narrowly focusing those descriptions, they're like, well, this learning outcome itself isn't written the way we want it to be written to show, to really get at what we want it to get, right? Analyze chemical concepts and processes. What we really want students to do is solve problems using chemical concepts. So they ask if they can change it. I'm like, of course you can change it. Now, keep in mind, all changes made during a given academic year aren't put in place until the following academic year for record keeping and documentation purposes. Trying to keep track of multiple versions of the same learning outcome or different learning outcomes within a same academic year is just too complex when we already have a very complex system. So any changes are applied to the following academic year. We also offer a column in the Excel file for notes and comments. Now, if this gets too long and we're going multiple semesters, so this one specifically says spring 25 notes. If we can, keep using the same tab in Excel and have another column for fall or summer, then we will. Sometimes it just gets too messy and the committees are like, we can't keep track of anything. So then we'll have a cleaned up version in a new tab in that Excel file for them to work on the following semester. So we roll things over, and then we have a final version. So this is the post revision, the cleaned up version with that revised learning outcome, the revised criteria with those descriptions. Now, think iterative. This was accurate this academic year. Next academic year, they've already going to be doing more changes. One of our other faculty committees came up with alternate language for this no submission, no evidence. So you can see we've used the same standard language in that column for a while. Well, folks have said it's vague, it's confusing. We agree. It can be vague and it's confusing. Absolutely. What are your suggestions? How do you want to revise it? Well, a different committee came up with a suggestion that was adopted by the chemistry. And now that for the fall 25, the description for no submission, no evidence will read as student does not submit assignment or submitted work does not address the learning outcome criteria. So that gives a lot more clarity in what that means, right? So we really lean into everything related to this iterative nature and continuous process and listening to what the faculty want to change and how to change it. The intent and the important piece is that every faculty member on the committee has a voice in this process and they are heard. So I'm going to mention just a little bit about how we implement these rubrics and what we do about data collection. So we use Canvas outcomes for our collaborative online programs. We have master lists of the learning outcomes at university level that can then be trickled down into all accounts throughout the Indiana University system within Canvas. In advance of each term, we work with the faculty committees to determine which courses and course sections should be used for program assessment. Sometimes we're able to set a very strict assessment schedule, but other times we are not. Our grad certificates will only have 1 or 2 course offerings each semester. So that really limits which learning outcomes we can assess at any time. So those structures still need to be in place, but things like with our business administration BS, that all of the core courses are offered all the time. So we are able to develop a more structured assessment schedule that has like learning outcomes 3 and 4 assessed this academic year, learning outcomes 5 and 6 assessed this academic year. It all varies depending upon the program. So we still have to look and see what courses are available and which courses we're going to collect data in. And then a week or 2 before the semester starts, depending upon when the session starts. So fall, spring, summer, it varies just a little bit in the timing. Prior to the start of the term, we contact the course instructors. We share with them the rubrics and coordinate meeting with them to talk about program assessment efforts in their course. We emphasize that we don't want instructors creating new assignments. We use existing assignments already in their course. We're contacting them a week or 2 before the semester starts. They're not going to have the time or ability to create brand new assignments just for program assessment. We don't want them to worry about that. Whatever is in your course already that aligns with the learning outcomes. On top of that, they don't even have to collect data on all the criteria. If a learning outcome has 3 criteria and an assignment in their course aligns to 2 of the 3 criteria, but The third one, it doesn't fit. We don't force a fit. It's okay. We take it back to the faculty committee. Say, we were able to collect data on these two criteria for this learning outcome in this course and not this other one. Easy. So we want to keep it as easy and simple and straightforward as possible. One of the primary ways we add it to it is if they use an existing grading rubric in Canvas, we just add these outcomes to the bottom, but we add them in a way where those outcomes do not count towards the grade on the assignment, nor do they count towards the grade in the course. So you'll see on the image here, the actual grading criteria are worth like 20 points, 10 points. And when you come to the outcomes, it's just dashes. So that means that those don't count towards the grade. And we do that on purpose. We don't want double jeopardy. We don't want students to worry about their grades. We don't want course instructors to worry about the impacts of the assessment on student grades. Then all the instructor has to do is when the students have submitted the assignment, they just click on these little grading scales in SpeedGrader in Canvas and click Save. And then the data is recorded. So then when we pull the data out of Canvas, we just pull the data on those learning outcomes. We don't see anything with grades. It's just the outcomes data. And then we compile all that information into reviews and reports that go back to the course instructor and to the faculty committees. So circling back, how has our process transformed the faculty experience? So remember, we inherited program assessment landscape that was really dysfunctional and characterized by a lot of apathy, if not active hostility. So now, some of the metrics that we have suggest that the faculty attitude towards assessment has generally improved. Especially so are the leaps in compliance with the completing program assessment related tasks, like our course instructor reflections. So instructors of all courses involved in program assessment data collection are invited to complete a reflection form after each semester. And for the summer 24, which is the most recent data we have, over 80% of faculty have completed that. And that was in stark comparison to when we were starting this process and piloting this brand new process where we had abysmal response rates of completions. So one of the things to keep in mind here that's not captured in this chart is the amount of course sections that we are collecting data in has exponentially increased. So for comparison, in summer 24, we collected data in 44 course sections. In summer 23, we collected data in 14 course sections. So to be able to increase to 44 course sections and still have a response rate and completion rate of over 80% is phenomenal. And we are ecstatic about that. So even more insights can be drawn from the feedback that they provide on those reflection forms. We specifically asked them, after scoring, describe how well the rubric learning outcome fits your course or assignment and met your expectations for alignment. Include any recommendations to the learning outcome or to the rubric you might recommend to the faculty committee. So we want their input on, does this work in your course? Is it too vague? Does it need revisions? Generally, the feedback is really positive, and even when it's not positive, the feedback provided is extremely constructive, detailed, and actionable. We get also a lot of anecdotal reports and informal feedback, unsolicited pieces of, thank you for making this process so easy. I just got an email today with someone saying that thank you so much for clarifying how to do this in SpeedGrader. I'd never done this before. Thank you so much. It's so easy. So we still do have work to do to refine and automate our processes, working on things. We still use a lot of Word documents and Excel spreadsheets, and I want to be able to use databases and data visualization. We're getting there. We'll continue to empower faculty throughout this process at all levels, especially with our faculty committees. So I do have here some questions for you guys. So I'll give you a minute to join the Mentimeter. I do have QR code things for each of the slides as well, so hopefully they'll work too. Give a minute here. Join Menti. And the code is 37387726. So what 3 words describe program assessment at your institution? Yeah, I put the QR code up there. And if for some reason you can't get the QR code or Menti to work, feel free to drop your responses in the chat. So the code, oh, the code's different here, isn't it? You should be able to scan the QR code. 47855714 for this particular question. Yeah, so I see a lot of things that were there when I started. Assessments, not welcome, tedious, scattered, burden, subjective, non-standardized. In progress. I like that. We'll go to the next one. Thank you for your responses. There we go. What is one strategy from today's presentation that you could implement to improve program assessment at your institution? Responses? All right, I know we are in a unique position because we do have multiple assessment staff, and sometimes it can be hard with your staffing only has one person doing even more work than what than what I've got here. So again, like if you have issues, please feel free to put your responses in the chat. That is another alternative. I'm going to skip to the next question and see if that'll work here. Oh, there it goes. Words. Integrate with Canvas. Okay. Yes, Canvas outcomes is great. There are some things that are a little bit of bumpy road with Canvas. So if folks are interested in Canvas and have not used Canvas outcomes before, please feel free to reach out to me later. I will have our email address on the last slide. Would be happy to assist in giving you our tips and tricks on what works and what doesn't with Canvas outcomes. What strategies do you implement for sustaining a culture of enthusiasm for assessment? Reflection is a tool for more engaging course. Ooh, I like that. Okay, we're gonna skip to the end here because we're almost out of time. Want to make sure everybody has enough time to get to their next session. So some of our takeaways and what's next. So engaging faculty across all of these different entry points for assessment is difficult. Assessment is hard, and getting collaborative investment and changing the culture of assessment at an institution is hard. Intentionally, highly scaffolded approaches to support faculty-driven assessment design can improve engagement and compliance. So having a structure in place helps significantly. Having an assessment team, a dedicated assessment team across programs can help scalability and reduce faculty burden. If you need justifications at your institution for more assessment staff, feel free to borrow this. Structures help help faculty engage with assessment, but then their flexibility sustains their engagement. So having options and saying, here are the guardrails, but here are all these different other pieces that we can do within those guardrails. And then empowering the faculty to determine the assessment implementation at both strategic and on the ground levels helps build buy-in. Some areas we still need to develop: program level rubric norming. We need to have some rubric norming sessions now that we've developed all these rubrics. We have a couple of committees who are interested in doing that. Reviewing the use of criteria, what was actually used for program assessment versus what we anticipated would be used for program assessment. And all of this is going to be even more important as accreditation agencies are focusing more and more on student success being a reflection of assessment of student learning too. So all of these are being interchangeable and being used as qualifiers for what student success means. So HLC has already revised their criteria for accreditation to include call outs about assessment of student learning. So this sets us up when we have all this evidence to say all our collaborative programs have a regular collaborative process to do all of these pieces. So we do have some references, and thank you and questions.
Well, no questions, but thank you. That was good stuff. Good thing. What I like about it is good things that we could go back and actually implement. So, okay, so let's wrap it up then. Allison, thank you so much for doing this. Very,
Mhm.
very useful information. And
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here.
we had to do it. And in a few minutes, we got another session coming up. Hope to see folks there.